Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of the Middle Georgia Spotlight. I'm your host, Jack Ellis. Thank you so much for joining us in the Spotlight this week. No stranger to being in the Spotlight. I've actually been in the big Spotlight for the last year and so here in Macon and Bibb County is the superintendent of our schools, Dr. Curtis Jones. He was with us at the beginning of the pandemic, and we want to come back and get an update and looking at the way forward for the Bibb County Public Schools. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
It's good to be here. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you so much. And as I said, you were here like last March. We were just beginning this pandemic, and you were always trying to feel your way through, kids being sent home. You didn't know how has that changed you in the last year? Well, first of all, how are you doing? With all of that's been going on.
I appreciate it. I'm doing well. I just had an interview, and they asked a similar question, and truthfully, I realized I wear the hat of a son, of an uncle, of a dad, of a superintendent. And all of those came into play as we were going through the pandemic because I have responsibility for the 20,000 plus students that we have, our 3,000 employees, but I also have responsibility to my mom and to try to make sure I keep her safe. And so I have a relative who has a medical condition, so he can't get a vaccine. And so how do you put all that together and inform what it is you want to do in Macon Bibb so everybody's safe, but kids can get an education? So I'll be honest, this has been a challenge, but it has been an opportunity to learn more about people and value relationships.
How has it changed, not you per se, because you come from a background that you trained to deal with adversity, on the fly, being a former military officer. But how has it changed learning? How has it changed the overall education system?
I think Macon Bibb has come out much better than how we went into it. So it's changed several things. One, our principals and our assistant principals saw how they really have to lead. We have a strategic objective that says we'll maintain a safe learning environment. COVID-19 put a different spin on that. You've been thinking about fights. You may think about somebody bringing a weapon. This whole idea about how you keep people safe in a pandemic was different for them. Two, teachers had to learn how to instruct kids remotely. Didn't know how to do that. Some had an idea. There were different theories. Do you have kids get online at the same time? Do you have them coming online when they're ready and learn? Can you flip the classroom? We had to figure that out. And teachers had to figure out what new skills they needed to make that work. The third way we came out different. Students had to demonstrate strength of character. It's one thing to be at home versus being in the classroom. Classroom teacher can come say, hey, hold your head up, get back on it. When they're at home, they just turn the computer off. And parents aren't around to be able to say, that's not acceptable. So students had to change. And so the whole idea of what education looks like today is nothing like it looked like back in 1950, 1960, where people would say you have desks all in a row and lined up and you got a chalkboard. Today we have computers for every one of our individual students. Teachers are able to see what they're doing on an individual basis. We have personalized learning plans for our students. And so it's changed us, I think, for the better.
Well, one thing, we are taping here at Mercer University, President Underwood owns this, and last year, both of you were on at the beginning of this, and he feared, the thing that he feared most, he said, well, what would happen to the public school system here, especially children that's marginalized, if you will, who were already having some challenges, structure, didn't have the right technology in the home. Well, did that turn out to be true?
I think to a large part it did turn out to be true. One, we realized you still have to take care of students' basic needs. And so we had to figure out how to feed students while they were home learning remotely. How do we handle that over the summer? If they're worried about just can they eat, can they survive, they're not ready to learn. Two, you had that attendance issue where kids were being pulled in some cases by the streets or by something where they weren't really ready to learn the way we needed them to with that strength of character. And then I think the third part of it was when we now look back a year later, our graduation rate went down. And our graduation rate declined about 3 points. And I think in large part it was because of the pandemic. The state as a whole went up, we went down. So when you think about that, the question is why? And I think in some ways it's because of our social economic status. I think it has to do with the level of preparedness and what we have done to help our students in the past. Our schools do a great job of pushing kids in the months of March, April, and May to get them across the finish line. That's when the pandemic hit, so the kids were at home, and so we were not able to push them. Some of them just didn't want to be found, and so I think that led to...
I know one of them.
You know, okay. So I think that led to some of the problems that we had, and we just weren't ready for that. And so I think we're now better prepared to respond to it this year.
Now that's looking back. Now let's look forward. As you said, we're looking forward because everything's about the future, but cars do have a rear view mirror. We have to glance back every now and then to see where we've come from, to know where we're going. But you mentioned vaccines.
Yep.
Now that's something that's been controversial. Some people say they don't want to do it. Now what about you said? Now what about your teachers and the student body going forward, going into the 21-22
school year?
Will that be a mandatory vaccine for students over the age of 12 and teachers? What are the options there?
So there are options, and you can make it mandatory. At this point, we're not doing that. We believe that it's best if people are able to take the vaccine if they can. We're going to strongly encourage them to. I'm leading by example. I got a vaccine. I'm asking principals to do that. But I'll be honest, in some cases, there are some individuals who cannot take a vaccine. And how do you end up being respectful of them without violating their medical condition, their personal information, without jeopardizing others? So we're going to encourage everyone to get a vaccine. I'm hoping that we can get to herd immunity. Initially, my goal was to get to 80%. I think now 70% is probably more realistic. And we're going to see what we can do to get there. But we're not looking at making it mandatory at this point.
Well, what if you don't get there? You don't get that herd immunity. Children still going back to school in August, I guess. Will they go? Will that be a combination of virtual learning and class? Will it be back to quote unquote normal, if you will?
So in Bibb County, we're going to have a VIP Academy, which will be a virtual school. Last year was a program. This year we're trying to make it a school. We're working with the Georgia Department of Education to do that. We have about 500 students who've signed up for that, grades 4 through 12. And so I think that's going to be one change that you will see in the future. We also are going to be offering the opportunity for some students who have a need for like a French class example. They will be able to take it with another teacher on another campus because we don't have French teachers in all of our schools. And so I think you're going to see that happening as well. But when we look at this idea of school next year, it's going to be 5 days a week. Students are going to be encouraged to come, as I've just indicated, and we're going to have 3 feet distance between students, and we're going to encourage those who've not taken a vaccine to wear a mask. For those who have, we're going to follow the current CDC guidance, which is you can loosen it up a little bit. That's where we currently are.
Well, in addition to making sure that students are learning, you have a physical responsibility to manage budgets and that, and I'm sure it has cost you some money that you didn't anticipate. Has it? Maybe you had to buy machines, I don't know. But I understand that the federal government did step in and provide Bibb County and other school systems some additional funding. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. They stepped up, the federal government and the state stepped up last spring and gave us what they call CARES Act 1. We used that money to buy protective equipment for our staff as well as for students. We used it to produce signs, and we were able to get through the spring. They then came back with CARES Act 2 that we were able to use to buy an air filtration system. So now when you go to any of our schools, we now have better air quality. It's a process where the air comes in, goes through the air conditioning system, gets filtered, it pulls in all the germs, and I'll be honest, I wish we'd been able to do it before, it just hadn't been a priority, but that has helped us greatly. And so we have been able to continue to have signs that have been posted, provide protective equipment, being able to better clean the air, and also been able to buy computers for our students so those who wanted to be home could stay home. Last spring, I'm going to say 60% of our kids were home when they didn't necessarily have to be. And so that money has helped us out. The latest round of funding is called the American Rescue Plan, and we received over $100 million for that.
Say that again.
We received over $100 million for American Rescue Plan.
$100 million for Bibb County.
$100 million
To be
for
used
Bibb
in
County.
1 year or over a period of time?
Over 3 years.
3 years, okay.
Over 3 years. And so we're using that money to, one, sustain what we had in the past, to make sure that we can provide, I'm going to say, accelerated learning for our students. So like right now, we have what we call summer camps. Students are not in summer school, they're in camps. So it's not just reading and math, but they're also doing dance and art and those kinds of things to make it more like a fun experience so we could get kids there. Usually we have about 100 kids, 150 kids in summer school. This year we're up to 250, so we doubled it. Not as many as we wanted to get, but we're taking what we can. We're also going to use that money next year to have more after-school programs, and we're going to have summer school next year, and we hope to be able to expand it. And so the money we're getting is to address what we think has been learning loss by accelerating learning over the next 3 years.
We've heard a lot about learning loss, and I'm sure based on what you said earlier, your graduation rate, that you look at that. So I guess if you go down the line to 8th graders and that, you would probably see that. And so some of these academies, is that designed to recapture, if you will, that learning loss and get the students back on?
It is. Last spring, the thought was that kids should not be retained because they weren't able to be in school. So we gave students an opportunity to make up grades, improve their grades, and very few kids were retained. This past year, the year we just finished, you saw that we started the year virtually. We stayed virtually almost all the first semester. We let some students come back in February, but about half the kids still stayed home. We still think it may be unfair to retain those kids when we were not able to get them in an environment where they could be best served. So over the next 3 years, we're going to take this American Rescue Plan money and use it to improve, again, technology, teacher training, and provide opportunities for students to make up whatever learning loss they may have experienced by accelerating it with summer school, with Saturday school, with after school.
In case you're just joining us, we're talking with Dr. Curtis Jones, who's the superintendent of the Bibb County School System. He and his team did a great job this year getting us through this, but we still have a ways to go. We're not out of the woods yet. But speaking of parents and speaking of our social and economic status, a lot of people don't have computers, don't have Wi-Fi. Can you use some of that money, that $100 million, to augment a poor parent, well, when I say a poor parent, a parent with limited resources to buy a computer, other devices that they need?
So with the money that we received, we were able to provide a device to every student. So every student now has a device that they can use from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And it was a new computer that was made available last year. So it is current, up to date, one of the most powerful that we could provide. For those individuals who lived in a zone that did not have Wi-Fi, we were able to give them what we call a hotspot. So they were able to take that to their home and use it in order to get to the internet. Initially, we thought 4 or 5 people could get on one hotspot. We realized that wasn't true. It wasn't powerful enough. Bandwidth wasn't big enough. Now we're able to give each student one hotspot. The problem we ran into, they didn't just use it for school. They used it for whatever. And
Surfing the net.
There you go. So it didn't last as long as we had hoped, but we've learned that lesson as well. And so we think we've been able to address some of those issues. Now, do we still have some dead spots in the community? Yes. But our community stepped up. We were able to allow some churches to work with us, so kids were able to go to some of their sites. Some went to the libraries, and they were able to get on the Wi-Fi there. The community in Macon-Bibb has some spots downtown where there's free Wi-Fi, and so students were able to get on. And here's the other thing we learned. Some parents just took their kids to the schools, parked in the parking lot, and got on Wi-Fi. And so it became...
That's determination.
That was determination. And so when people say people who have their kids in public school don't care about education, it's not true. They are doing the very best they can with what they have. But we realized then that our kids want to learn, parents want to be supportive, and we're doing all we can to make it work. This coming year, I think it's going to be less of an issue. Oh, I'm sorry, the other thing we did, we had 25 buses that we equipped with Wi-Fi. So we were able to park them in different locations throughout the community last year so that people who didn't have Wi-Fi could go get near that bus and sign on through the Wi-Fi bus that we had.
Oh, that's very innovative. Speaking of these computers and that, and you know, we had a lot of children that used to be quote unquote Title I, we call them, free and reduced lunch. But now no one, I guess there was a stigma attached to it, so everyone gets free lunch in your school system, I understand.
That is true.
Now, will everyone get a computer based on income?
Everyone got a computer. It was
I
called
didn't get one. I'm a parent, doctor. I want my computer.
Your son or your grandson got one?
Yeah, he had one. I bought him one. He didn't get a free one.
Well, so he could go back to school and sign up. Some parents decided.
Well, this is last year, so
Okay. But some parents decided they did not want the computer that we were providing because they wanted one that they knew their child was comfortable with and that worked with their Wi-Fi at home. But we had enough new computers for every student.
Yeah, I didn't pursue it because I could afford one, and maybe someone I would be taking one that someone else.
So what happened
could
back
use.
in the fall was that they were coming in, and so those people who had good computers, they were they kept working. But those who didn't have anything or had an old one that we'd given, they were the first. But by the middle of October, everyone who wanted a new computer could have gotten one. And I'll go back and check on yours.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out.
Yeah. Now, I want to get to other aspects because, you know, it's not just, as you said, these students in the summer program are having dance, they're having other extracurriculars. So school is not just about academics, about the other thing. Will we see football stadiums in September, a couple months from now? Will we see basketball arenas full going forward?
So the monies that we've received can be used for some construction projects, but it's primarily built to help students get back to learning.
No.
I understand.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that, though,
okay.
because I've had some people say, why can't you build?
Okay.
And so we can't build anything. There are some strings attached. Having said that, I think you know that Ed DeFore is a state-of-the facility that is looking good. Henderson,
Out at West Side.
Out at West Side. Thompson also now over on the north side is good too. We are.
Henderson's being upgraded? Is that, do you own Henderson's now, or is that the county?
That's still
owns
still the county.
Okay.
We're working on that.
Okay.
But if I go on the other side, where north side is, if we look at that stadium, we're renovating it as well, putting in new turf, new scoreboard, working on getting better parking over there as well.
Yeah, but you know why this pandemic? What I noticed, you know, from afar, I was out of the country part of the time, but yet I noticed from afar, you still had activity, you still had a construction project. Northeast was still being, so you didn't stop. What was you had to just add on? You didn't stop the other thing.
We did not stop. Well, so two things. One, so what you're going to see is, I think, some social distancing inside stadiums and gyms. But as more people getting vaccines, the easier it's going to be. We only let about 20% of the capacity of a gym be in place this past year. This coming year, we're looking at 50%. And the more people get vaccines, we can raise it to 75. So we're going to be careful, but we're not going to go back to where we were right away. Same thing is true for the football stadiums. The construction projects we had, you're right. We were able to continue those. The community was able to keep moving forward because of our construction companies and because of the dedication of the people who were our partners with us. So we were able to finish our renovation projects on time, as well as build a John Lewis Elementary School, opened up on time, a brand new school.
Where is that?
That was,
I was out of the country too long. When did it open?
So we combined Brookdale and Raleigh.
Yeah, right.
And when we combined those two schools, Raleigh was that new school is now the John R. Lewis Elementary School.
I didn't know that, and I should have known that.
So, and it's on the same site where Raleigh is,
Yeah.
or was.
Out near Greenbrier.
Right.
Yeah, I know it.
And so we got that up and going. We finished the new Appling Middle School, which is now adjacent to Northeast High School. That opened up on time as well. And so, yeah, we were very pleased that our construction projects continued.
How, I guess the question would be, if we, I'm sure a lot of case studies will, in universities will look at what you were able to accomplish here in other similar school systems and try and you know, prevent or try to perfect what you've done. If we had another, thank God, hopefully we never, but if we had another pandemic similar to this, would we be like, be able to take something out of the box and dust it off and say, this is what you do and this is?
I think so, because the plans that we have now for emergency closure have been updated. So if we have to close school now, which I think you will find is, students will be told, take your computers home, we're going to be able to give you your assignments. Just like Mercer University, we will say we're using Canvas. Our students have learned how to use Canvas so they can continue their learning. Parents, if they're home with their child, will be able to see how lessons will continue. And I think parents have learned, one, it's a challenge when kids are home learning virtually, and you have to keep your eyes on them as well. But we'll be able to get through that in the short term. So here's something. I'm not sure you will ever see another snow day again where kids will be home without any work to do. If we're thinking about closing school, it's going to be take your computers home with you, so now we're able to say, here's the work that you're going to get. I think that's going to be another change you're going to see across the country.
So the contingency plans are, if you want to go back to the military, the battle plan.
There you go.
Update the battle plan to move forward, if you will.
That contingency plan is in place, and I think we can implement it much faster than where we were. Teacher skills have improved greatly in being able to do that. The challenge is getting new teachers up to speed right away with how to do that. And I'll be honest, our teachers in Macon Bibb are doing a great job.
I'm going to recommend that you go to Fort Valley State, the majors, these students who are majoring in education, Macon State and Mercer, and give a presentation as to probably what they will encounter, if they encounter, because I'm sure you have a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge to share with our future.
We'll be more than happy
teachers.
to do that, and we have good relationships with all three.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned about the social distancing going forward. Who advises you? What do you get do you get it from, you don't have a medical staff, or do you? Do you get it from the CDC? Do you get it from Dr. Fauci? Where do you get your information to put your protocols in place?
Well, last year was challenging. This year is a little bit better. So we have several sources that we go to. First, we do listen to what the CDC says, but we also work closely with the North Central Health District. They provide guidance to us that really comes down from the State Department of Health as well. And they give us a current status, if you will, of what's happening, make recommendations, and they help interpret what the CDC has said is what they recommend for schools to do. But the CDC doesn't dictate. It's all the recommendation. The other source that I go to is an advisory that I'm on with superintendents across the nation. I'm fortunate that I met other superintendents, and like today I'm on a task force that's going to meet with the U.S. Secretary of Education, where he's trying to figure out how can we make the American Rescue Funds better and implement them in a way that's effective. So we get on these team meetings, if you will, and we learn from each other. That started last spring. We had a very close relationship with Clayton County, Savannah Chatham, and Doherty County. The four of us met every 2 weeks, the superintendents, to talk about here's what's happening, what are you doing, how are you addressing it, so we shared information. The superintendent in Clayton County at that time was on a national advisory, and so he was able to bring in that information as well. I was on the state advisory with our governor and our state school superintendent. So by sharing information, I think we were able to figure out what's best practice, how do you move forward, and what do you do. Lastly, and I have to thank Mercer University, they had a lady who was doing a newsletter, and her newsletter came out 4 times a week. It gave a status of what's happening in the nation, what's happening in Georgia, and in some cases she highlighted what's happening in Bibb, made recommendations. And so I read that religiously, and I would share that with our Board of Education every week. Here's where we are with COVID, here's where we are with recommendations, and here's what we're doing. And so I felt very informed because I told you about my son and my niece and her boyfriend. 3 different school systems, so I could also hear what other people were doing as well, and it helped me make better decisions and recommendations to our Board of Education.
Now, not only were you leading Bibb County school system, but weren't you the superintendent of the year coming into this pandemic or going out of it?
So going into it, I was the current National Superintendent of the Year.
Yeah.
So I got fortunate. I was able to
Have access to some things, I'm sure.
There you go. And
Yeah.
so that has helped us out greatly.
And I'm sure people look to you. Not only do you have access, but people look to you for leadership. And you mentioned these 4 schools that you had relationship with. Was that because of the demographics similar to Dougherty County, Chatham, Bibb demographics similar?
It was. We wanted to make sure that if we were taking recommendations, that we were able to find out what's going to best inform us and work for us here in Macon-Bibb. That's what was important.
Now, going forward, of course, we don't have any crystal balls, but you have to project and plan for going forward. So I guess if we had to summarize this to parents going forward, you would tell them school starts when? And
School's going to start August 2nd.
and students should be prepared to show up in person.
They need to show up in person. We're going to have school 5 days a week. Teachers are going to be teaching from the classroom. If a parent wanted their child to learn remotely, they've already had an opportunity to apply for that, and we've already filled up all of those seats. But we're going to be able to accelerate learning. We want to take student strength of character and use it now to accelerate learning to make next year the best year we've had.
And you're going to try to get at least herd immunity, try to get as many teachers and students. Because now they're talking 12-year-olds getting vaccinated down to 12. But you would tell, but based on, I want parents to understand, you're not saying that mandatory, that 12-year-olds should get. You're not recommending that.
I'm not.
It's
because
available if they want it.
Right, but if you look at the data has now been collected across the world for over a year now. What are the chances of a student getting the vaccine, getting the disease, COVID-19, and being sick or passing it on? And truthfully, the numbers are very, very low. If you look currently, more students, and I shouldn't more students, more people are having deaths because of car accidents, because of violence that we do to one another than they are because of COVID. And so it's really very, very low. So I'm feeling pretty good that we're going to have a normal school year next year.
Okay.
But we're going to continue to implement the lessons we've learned.
Well, great. Well, we thank you for your leadership and thank you for getting us this far and getting us out of the woods next year, hopefully, and we won't be able to solve all this problem. And again, get your vaccine if you haven't got one, because you'll make, not only for you, but for everyone who's around you. But you don't say that Dr. Jones said you got to have a vaccine to go back to school. Now, my kids didn't get vaccines, so no, you don't have to have a vaccine. It's encouraged, but not required, but recommended. Dr. Jones, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good
Appreciate
to see
it.
you. Good to see you, and a good year along with you. You don't get the year off, so this summer is still going on. Everybody else is on vacation. You'll work and get it ready to go back in August, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you. Until next week, I'm your host, Jack Ellis. Goodbye.